It's Alexander. So today I'm going to be bottling the cider that I've been brewing recently. Now, if you haven't seen the first two videos, I would recommend watching them now. In the first video, I go over how to brew. In the second video, I show you the racking process and the cold crashing process. Now, we ended the last video with that cold crashing process, so now we're going to be picking up where we left off. Now, I will say that I have been cold crashing for a little longer than I originally anticipated because the holidays came around and I had a trip to Kentucky planned where I did the distillery runs. That was a lot of fun, but now that the holidays are over and the New Year's come, I'm ready to bottle this up. So let's get into it. Now, I am carefully pulling this out of the fridge to try not to stir up any of the sediment at the bottom there. But as you can see, it is very clear. It's been about 3 weeks in the fridge when it only needed a few days, but it's actually not a bad thing. When you let your brews sit and mellow out over time, they tend to form more complex, deep flavors. And most of the time that will actually help out your brew. You lose a little bit of that yeasty, bready flavor, and you get a lot more of those deep notes from the fruit or the honey or whatever else you're using. I have no idea what to expect with this because this is my first run of making any cider, and I'm really excited to try it. So let me go ahead and set up my siphoning system real quick. Okay, so much like last time, I have one carboy up top and one below. I'm going to be using my siphon here in a minute to pull this cider into this new carboy. Just go ahead and remove the cap here. A little bit of pressure in there. Now this is my siphon. As you can see, it's been recently sanitized, as well as everything else that I'm using. That carboy has been sanitized, and the bottles I'll be using soon are also all sanitized. Go ahead and insert this side of the siphon into the lower container and the pump side of the siphon into the higher one. And then we'll just give this a few pumps. Now it's slowly going from this container into that one. And the whole reason why we're doing this is to get rid of that little bit of sediment at the bottom now that it's cold crashed. You can see how clear it is on this one over here. There's some condensation on this from being cold in the refrigerator that kind of made it look a little foggy, but you can see that's just extremely clear now. Looks like it could potentially have some natural carbonation. I can't quite tell yet. I'm just going to gently tilt the higher carboy to get the rest of that out. Trying to be gentle enough that I don't disrupt the bottom sediment. All right, that's where we'll stop. Go ahead and remove our siphon. Now I'm gonna get this off the box here and clean up just a little bit. All right, so now you can really tell how clear this brew is. Let me just hold that up for you real quick. That looks great. And you can see what's left behind. That is technically called lees. That is just all the dead yeast that was still floating in solution before I cold crashed it. It is now all synced to the bottom, and we just removed it. So now we're left with a nice clean brew. I'm just gonna hold this to the back for now. So now that I have my nice clean cider, I'm actually going to give it a little bit of a taste test to make sure I don't need to add any sweetness to it, and just to see how it tastes. I'm very curious. Just gonna pour some straight into this Glencairn. I'm gonna give it a smell first and see what I think. It smells so refreshing. It's got that candy sweetness in there, but then you get that nice underlaying honeycrisp apple smell on there. It's just fantastic. Now let's give it a taste. So this actually came out a lot more dry than I was expecting, but I honestly kind of like them more dry. I do feel that if I were to give this to somebody else, I'd probably make it a little bit sweeter because those sweeter wines tend to be more of the crowd pleasers. Wow. The closest wine that I can think that this tastes like is going to be a Sauvignon Blanc. It's dry and medium bodied. It's not too watery, but not thick like a Cabernet. And it has this perfect level of acidity that goes all the way through and ends with a nice clean, crisp apple flavor. It's tart, but not too tart. And it has a very sweet aromatic to it. It's just not sweet on the tongue. Aroma is just perfect. I'm actually very happy with this, and I can't wait to share it with my friends and family. There actually is not any carbonation in there, as expected. That yeast was killed off a long time ago before I even cold crashed it. So there shouldn't be any residual CO2 in there from the yeast eating sugar. But if I did want to make this sparkling, you could use something like a soda stream. I've actually done that with some of my mead before and it was not bad at all. There are ways to get natural carbonation in your brews by letting a little bit of yeast survive in the bottling process, just long enough to be able to create some CO2 and pressurize your bottles. But that can get a little bit dangerous. I've never done it myself because I don't want to blow up any bottles and I couldn't recommend it to anybody. But if you know what you're doing, you can do that. Now I didn't get a hydrometer reading on this, so I actually cannot tell you what the ABV of this is, but by the taste, I do believe it is on the lighter side, probably around a 7 or 8% ABV, if I had to guess as a rough estimate. So I'm very happy with this cider. And now that it's finally done, it's time to bottle it. Let me show you how. Just a reminder, make sure that you do sanitize everything that you use during the brewing process, even the bottles when you're bottling them at the end, because if there's any type of fungus or rogue bacteria in there, they can feed off of this and that would not be a good thing for you in the future. So please sanitize it. This right here is what I use to sanitize. It's called Be Bright. This uses oxygen to clean your utensils and your bottles and everything. You can get it on Amazon for about $30 or $40 a box this big. You can get the smaller ones. They are cheaper that way and you can get them ordered to your door. I highly recommend using Be Bright for all of your brewing supplies. It's very easy to use, and when you're done, you can just throw it down your sink. So probably the easiest way to bottle your brew is to use your siphon again, to pull your brew out of your carboy or your fermenter directly into your bottles. But today I'll be pouring them directly from here into the bottles myself. And you know how I am, I'm not going to be using a funnel at all. I'll just go ahead and throw a cork on there for now, and on to the next. So I will say another perk of using a siphon instead of directly pouring it into your bottles like I'm doing is that you don't end up introducing as much oxygen as I am in this process. As you can see, all those bubbles right there, that's just mixing in oxygen and it can put off flavors into your brews. I do plan on drinking these pretty quickly, so I'm not too worried about it myself. But if you have the time and effort, I highly recommend using the siphon instead. We'll cork it up and get on to the next. Now I did anticipate anywhere from 3 to 4 bottles. Given that there's not very much left inside this carboy, I'm actually going to reopen those first 2 bottles and try to make them fit into 3 bottles. Arson, stop. No, stop, stop it. Arson. Stop it. Let me see, where's my camera? You know what, those do look a little bit full. On second thought, I think I'm just going to pour a little bit in a glass and drink it myself. You know what, that's close enough to me. Now, if you wanted to, you could stop here. Technically, it is bottled, but I will go a little bit further. I'll put some seals on the top of these as well as make some labels for them. So let me go ahead and do that. Oh, that's so good. All right, so for the next step, I have these shrink wrap pieces that I'll wrap over the top with a heat gun or my girlfriend's hairdryer. Either one will work. But I found that these look so professional on the top of a wine bottle. So let me plug that heat gun, hairdryer in real quick. You know, I don't feel too bad since I was the one that bought this for her, but if you do have a heat gun, just use that instead. So I'm going to turn this on and put it on the highest setting and kind of face it upwards so I don't heat up my bottle or my brew, and just try to get this shrink piece on the top. I've seen people use hot water before too to get more of a uniform shrink on there. As you'll see, it won't be perfect, but it does still look nice. All right, that's one bottle down, 2 more to go. All right, on to the last one. All right, so now I've got all 3 of these. Time to put some labels on them. All right, so I'll just be calling these Honeycrisp apple cider, and then I'll be printing the date on them as well. Looks like I just ran out of printer paper. Let me see if I have any more real quick. All right, so turns out I'm actually fully out of label paper. So I'm just going to hand label the rest of these. All right, so since I'm hand making some labels, I'm just going to make sure that they are thinner than the width of this tape right here so that I can tape both sides of it and then stick it to a bottle. All right, so now that you can see how poor my handwriting is, we have our labels. So I used to use this method of hand making labels back before I ever had a label maker. What I'm trying to achieve is to make the labels a little bit water resistant. So I'll be wrapping both sides in tape. And the best way to do that is to flip your labels upside down first. All right, so I'm just making sure that I'm leaving a little bit of a gap between each one of these so I can do one line of tape. All right, then we're gonna go all the way across and make sure that tape is adhering to the backs of these labels. I'll go ahead and get the sides of them too, just to make sure that it's nice and sealed. All right, now I'm gonna peel up my tape. And as you can see, those labels have stuck to the tape now. I'll try to lay it as flat as it'll allow me to. Get my fingers unstuck from it too. All right, now I'm gonna cut out my labels, making sure that I leave a little bit of gap between each one. Just gonna trim off some of the excess off the edges now. All right, and now I'm gonna line these back up. Now it might be a little bit hard to see, but I am leaving a gap between each one of these pieces of tape and the labels. Now it's important because we're about to put another strip of tape on top of this. I'm gonna make sure it's longer than the line of labels that I have going here. And I'm going to lay that directly onto the ground first. I'm gonna peel a second piece of tape and get it the same length just about. Now I'm going to overlap these 2 pieces that I just made. Make sure there's a little bit of a seal there. All right, so now comes the fun part. I'm going to peel up these 2 pieces of tape here, and I'm going to carefully place them on all of my labels. Now I'm going to make sure that this adheres really well on those labels and the tape below the labels. And now I'm going to peel the whole thing back up again. All of your labels should come off with it. Just going to go ahead and trim off some of the excess of these labels here. And I'm also going to separate each one of the labels. All right, now as you can see, I have my labels made now. I've got the one that I needed to name, and then I have my 3 dates written out as well. All right, so now that I'm done doing arts and crafts, I can finally label my bottles. There's bottle number 1. Bottle number 2. You know, it's really nostalgic using these handmade labels. It reminds me of first getting started when I was making mead for the first time. I didn't have a label maker back then, so I used to make labels out of sticky notes and tape, just like this. Go ahead and throw the date on there as well. And that is our third bottle. Here we have it, all 3 bottles of our cider. I'm really happy how this turned out, and it's been fun brewing again. I'll definitely be doing some more brewing videos in the future, but as of right now, I'm gonna enjoy my cider, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.